I see a lot of polyamory content about jealousy, but rarely is it made by or for men. Most of what I see is great advice for women and non-binary folks, but those of us who are socialized to become masculine people in this society need something a little different. Because the men who built the world around us in the educational and relational structures that we were born into taught us things about who we are and who our partners should be to us, particularly if those partners are women. It makes our jealousy show up differently than women's jealousy. And that training influences how our jealousy is expressed as behavior. And for polyamorous folks in particular, that's going to impact how jealousy impacts our relationships. Understanding how men's jealousy differs from women's jealousy and learning how women experience men's expressions of jealousy differently radically changed me. And because of that, I've come to believe that overhauling our relationship to jealousy should be a top priority for men, whether they're polyamorous or not. First, let's look at where our current feelings of entitlement to jealousy come from. In patriarchal societies like ours, men's jealousy often stems from societal norms that rationalize, normalize, and even, yes, praise male dominance and control, particularly over women's sexuality and bodily autonomy. Think about cultural narratives around the weakness of men whose partners have other partners. You've heard many of the names, the derogatories or the slurs. The jealousy that arises for men when they believe their partner is with someone else is partly rooted in gender-neutral fear of loss or desire for closeness or feeling left out, and maybe some trauma history. Everybody can have this stuff. Most people do have this stuff. But jealousy's overwhelming power and all-consuming nature for men is almost always linked to possessiveness and a perceived entitlement to dictate a partner's interactions with others and behaviors. Even for men who have cognitively decided to forego this right, this sort of cultural right. Indeed, polyamorous men, if we're not careful, we can even feel as though we aren't being appropriately appreciated or praised for declining that right. Such attitudes are reinforced by cultural narratives that equate a man's ability to control his partner with his masculinity and his honor. This stuff is deeply rooted in our society's history. We can look back to the Renaissance era and see it. Its many representations in masculine preoccupation with being cuckolded and the violent jealousy depicted in response. From Shakespeare's play, think Othello, to Calvin's sermons on the wickedness of women at the very beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Masculine identity has long been closely tied to the regulation of women's sexuality, and for just as long, men have felt anxiety and done violence when they felt their control was diminished. It's important to note here that men's jealousy has never been reliant on women's actual behavior. Men are at their most creative when imagining what a partner might be doing with another man. And many women have paid dearly for it, for those fantasies. In fact, this is one of the most consistent gender differences in research on the experience of jealousy. It's what we call cognitive jealousy. Men have much more of this, imagining and believing our partners are breaking some relationship agreements by secretly engaging with men, particularly with their bodies. In fact, for at least 500 years, our patriarchal society has taught that love and jealousy are inseparable, maybe even the same thing. Still today, there are people, many people, even some evolutionary psychologists, who will tell you that if your partner isn't jealous, They just don't love you. But you've heard most of that stuff before, I think. Now I want to speak to men about something that you probably don't know. Specifically, the difference between men's and women's jealousy behaviors. The expression of jealousy and behavior varies between genders. In a study of gender and jealousy expression, femme folks reported more pro-social responses, including integrative communication to identify issues in the relationship and work to a solution, whereas masculine folks reported more antisocial responses to jealousy, including aggressive communication, signaling of possession, contacting the rival or the perceived rival, purposeful manipulation of the partner, and even violence. This is all self-reported. As I list these negative behaviors, I can hear a bunch of guys already sort of tuning me out. That's not me. I'd never do that. And maybe you wouldn't. But that's not actually the point. The point I'm trying to make is that many, many men would and have. There's good evidence that 1 out of 3 women have experienced intimate partner violence by their early 20s. And almost all of that has come at the hands of men. And much of that has been justified in the name of jealousy. In fact, the same type of feelings and lower level jealous behaviors you're showing today that you feel okay about were likely the first steps these women experienced from these abusive partners in the past. The first steps on the road to overt physical violence that came later. That's why many researchers today in the field of intimate partner violence now categorize expressions of jealousy, period, themselves as an indicator of intimate partner violence. Think of it like this. If I told you that your partner, or at the very least one of their close friends, experienced violence from someone she trusted, who was wearing Old Spice cologne every time they experienced that violence, you'd probably be happy to stop wearing Old Spice. Even if it's the cologne your dad wore, and you feel really masculine in it, you feel entitled to wearing it, it's manly cologne. And even though she even sometimes wears women's Old Spice, you'd still probably say, I'm okay not wearing Old Spice. Now, I'm not saying, and it's certainly not as easy as stop being jealous. There's strong evidence that experiencing jealousy, jealous thoughts, jealous emotions, that experience is a function of, yes, gender, but also attachment. So insecure, particularly anxious, but also avoidant and ambivalent attachment increases jealous cognitions and feelings of inadequacy. Insecure attachment undermines trust and may magnify the likelihood that antisocial, jealous behaviors will be expressed. So there's other things going on. But while occasional jealous feelings are a common human experience in mononormative relationships in particular, persistent and intense male jealousy can escalate into emotional abuse, even in polyamory. So whether we consciously mean to or not, our expressions of jealousy can often be experienced as threatening signals that a woman's behavior should change, or that they're in the wrong, or that violence is coming. And the fact that this can undermine the partner's autonomy and self-esteem and create an environment of fear and dependence should make us want to reconsider. I'm not saying that men should never feel jealous or discuss feelings of jealousy or inadequacy with their partners. But I am saying that we should interrogate those feelings when they arise. We must ask ourselves, where is this coming from? Whose problem is it really? If I'm considering sharing it with my partner, have I made sure that all of the threatening, emotionally charged content is drained out first? Is there any way that my partner could hear what I'm communicating as criticism of her or a bid to get her to change her behavior? Am I communicating something to strengthen our relationship, or am I asking her to manage my emotions? As men in relationships with women, we can show up for our partners by acknowledging the patriarchal underpinnings of jealousy and its potential to manifest as emotional abuse. And do the work on our own first, so we can ultimately enjoy healthier, more equitable relationships. Something to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts.